Okay, welcome back to Clueless FM 60 Minutes this April with my man Hooded Man and myself going south. So, what's up?
Well, it's a busy time, really.
It is?
Not really anything specific, except that I am elected local leader of the Pirate Party, of course. That's good.
Pirate Party, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Everyone was so nice about it. I was very pleased with it.
Don't you have to wear a black patch on your eye if you're a leader of the Pirate Party?
I went with the patch many years ago during Carnival.
Okay.
And I had headaches for days afterwards.
Okay.
When you block one eyesight, it will be very. You block your entire sight, really. You risk getting blind, even.
Yeah. Okay.
So I didn't want to do that again.
It's kind of a self-fulfilling state that you're blocking your eye and then you become like that.
The one-eyed man, right? It's an old legend. I walked around the city for an entire day, and everyone knowing me nodded to themselves. This is how you are, they told me. So that's why I became a member of a pirate party 30 years later, I guess.
So do you have a hook for a hand or something? No? Like in the cartoons?
No, that's just one pirate, my man.
Okay.
I don't remember which pirate, but it's just one man.
I think it's Captain Hook from Donald Duck version of some pirate stuff.
Probably, yes.
Yeah. So, did you catch the start of the World War III the other day?
Oh yes, it's hard to miss it. That's for sure. We had. I have been in several protests, both in London and in Bergen, actually, against it.
Yeah.
So it's great. It's a horrible act, but it gets a lot of action from radical people, which is good.
So what happened in London?
A lot of stuff, but was that too. It was a 3-day trip this time.
Yeah.
So I walked. I didn't take the tube, the underground, at all, actually. I walked all over the city, 300,000 steps in 3 days.
Okay.
Amazing. I just walked and walked and walked. And it's the first time I haven't used the underground at all. I couldn't afford it, so but it was a great walking is a great pastime anyway.
Yeah, you could have had my Oyster card though if I knew you were going there.
Yeah, I had an Oyster card with even with a few pounds on it, but I didn't use it. I just fuck it. It's not necessary, really. I had no trouble at all with walking. My feet could take it well. I have a sore ass. That's all, really.
Tell me about it.
My feet is perfectly fine, but my ass got seriously sore.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Yes. So I could say I overextended myself, even if I didn't know I was overextending myself.
So maybe maybe I could segue over to something else from the UK for my first point here. This is something I found in a tabloid called The Guardian in England. It's a guy called Monbiot. This was on the 24th of January this year. And
I'm familiar with him, George Monbiot, right?
Yeah, I'm just going to quote Monbiot here. It's a short paragraph. But today there is nowhere to turn. The wild lands and rich ecosystems that once supported hunter-gatherers, nomads, and the refugees from imploding early states who joined them now scarcely exist. Only a tiny fraction of the current population could survive a return to the barbarian life. Consider that, according to one estimate, the maximum population of Britain during the Stone Age, when people survived by hunting and gathering, was 5,000. And then it's my comment that in some forum, just to get me into what this was about, he makes some interesting points.
Yes.
With no state, only 5,000 Homo saps could survive in the UK, and that was before we wrecked the forest and the biosphere. Yeah.
Absolutely, he's a strange guy to me, really. His observations are great. It's his conclusions that are totally fucked up. He is a supporter of nuclear power, for one thing. And I have had several discussions with him actually on the web about that.
Yeah,
he's just a jerk basically.
And some of the
no matter how observant he is about the crisis, he is managing to identify the causes of it all. But the solution to him, nuclear power plants.
Which is pretty. Right. Yes, hello? Can you hear me?
There you were gone. There were a bang.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's quite strange in that way with the nukes and stuff. But I think another difference between, for instance, him and me is that he is still a climate alarmist, whereas I am a post-alarmist. I've been an alarmist before, like half a decade ago. But today I'm not trying to warn people so that they can get their heads out of their asses and start bicycling or whatever, because the time has gone really for trying to turn the ship around, I think.
Well, he is a classic liberal, probably. Right? He wants to save the ship. So.
Yeah, that's another difference, because a lot of us people in the so-called Doomosphere, we find that we actually do not want to save this civilization, because we think about other living beings apart from human beings, right?
Oh yes, and it's us as well. We are currently committing suicide, right? Collective suicide. So that's no favorable state of being at all. There is a collective insanity going totally off the church. Really.
And I think
he is certainly a part of that.
I think it's partly to do with when you can sort of feel that certain quarters of society have realized that it's not going to be a good solution. It's not going to end well, and then actually Monbiot himself talks about in that piece I was reading from now that Trump's America and May's Britain, they're actually downsizing the state tremendously right now because I would guess because their wise people, their smart people within the system have told them that this thing is going to hell in a handbasket, right? So you can just, it makes sense in a strange way, in a wicked way. It makes sense to just chop down the state because this is going to end in collapse anyway.
They just want to enrich themselves. That's why it's a classic way of shifting funds from the poor to the rich. So they are not very wise. They are just lucky.
But I was going to. I wanted to discuss this figure, this 5,000 figure that Monbiot comes up with, and what he's actually quoting there is quoting some science report about the past, about the Mesolithic, the middle of the Stone Age, before people started growing stuff in the ground, agriculture. There was they mean to say that there was 5,000 people tops in the UK area, in England and Scotland. So what he is saying is that after this society collapses, when you no longer grow grains and no longer have agriculture, this is what you have to look forward to. The 5,000 people max in the UK. But as I alluded to, that was while we had fish in the rivers, and we had wild animals in the forest. We had forests in England. So obviously you have to go down to maybe 500 or maybe 50 people in all of the UK, let's say in 2030. What do you think about that?
Oh, yes, and other places even less, right? So they have to stick to rivers, of course, with somewhat rich fisheries and all that.
Yeah.
Thames River will be
dead.
A life nerve, like it's always been. Of course, most of the lower parts of it will be flooded. So, but the higher levels will not be.
I actually spoke to one of these people in the forest outside Oslo. One of these people who do with the waterworks and stuff, who look after the water magazines in the forest around the city. And I asked him, because I'd started reading about collapse of civilization. This is like 3 or 4 years ago. It was a sunny day in the forest, and he wanted to have a break from his work, and I wanted to have a chat. So I asked him, what happens if when society breaks down and Oslo is collapsing as a city and as a society, how long after the collapse will you have drinkable water in the taps? And he said more or less like, a couple of days, within a week, you can't drink the water anymore.
Oh yes, I was surprised too when I found that out.
Yeah.
The collapse will start immediately. As long as it isn't maintained anymore, the system isn't maintained, it will just go away immediately, almost overnight.
Absolutely. And it's because they treat the water, before the water comes down to your tap, they treat it with antibacterial,
and everything. They treat it with all kinds of shit.
Yeah. So it's like both physical and chemical ways of cleaning the water with ultralight and everything,
So the solution is to go straight to the source, of course.
Yeah.
Go straight to the water.
Yeah.
And stay there.
Yeah. And preferably more than 2 kilometers from the big city.
Oh yes, far more from the big city, because the big city won't be there anymore.
And maybe some other inhabitants will have the same bright idea as you. Just go straight into the forest.
I think most people will stay in the city and get basically exterminate themselves by doing so. So if you stay several miles from the city in a mountain valley somewhere,
I have to have some coughing medicine because my throat is really sore today. Sorry.
The Americans won't like it. The Americans won't like it.
Coughing medicine?
Exactly. You can't drink coughing medicine.
I forgot that point. That's right. I have to go back to my wine.
As I said, you have a mountain valley somewhere.
Yeah.
Just with a cabin, preferably a stone cabin.
But you have the big problem of there not being so much game, especially in Britain. I mean, Norway still have the moose, the elk, all over, and the deers in the western part, but London area, Manchester, Liverpool, where you're gonna get the food.
All cities will be. People will starve to death and kill each other in a feeding frenzy, so to speak. As I said, I think I've said it before. You have to eat the meat that is there, and the meat is human.
So you think people will be cannibals?
Yes, that's. I don't think you will think about the final points of human society after a few days of starvation. Really. So.
After a few cold shoulders.
Yes. You can warm them, of course, like you do everything. But of course, fresh meat and cold meat is that's our natural state, really.
Yeah.
Right? To eat cold meat. So that's the most healthy, by the way, by far, too. So there will be lots of bodies. There will be no lack of bodies at all.
Yeah, for Norway, I'm kind of thinking of a major return of the wolf population. When that happens.
Absolutely, the predators will have a field day too. Other predators will have a field day too. So. And no one will bother with the wolf anymore. So it will be growing. The population will grow in just a few years.
So you mean they will stop saying that? Hey wolf, remember you're supposed to be on that side of the municipal border. Like we do today. All right.
Of course, people will have guns, so they might blow away a few wolves, but basically they won't bother with it because they will be so busy with survival that they can't do it.
And every farm and house in the countryside will have dead people to eat as well, So
yes,
lots of new.
Smart about that. If they have not prepared themselves.
Yeah, so I guess lots of new wolf pups will be able to breed in the farms and grow up in the farms and in the hills and slopes and
absolutely
rural areas. Yeah, and then
as
maybe
I said, there will be no lack of sustenance.
And then maybe descend on the bigger cities by the sea after the build up the population. Go down.
Yeah, if there are any more bigger cities by the sea, that is.
Yeah.
They will be basically about 50 meters below the surface in a few years. So,
it's pretty funny, you know, Norway and every other country. Just 20 or 30 years ago, we used to have huge storages of grain, you know, in every big city. And I think today, when we are so close to collapse, the storage, you know, the inventory of grain in our storages are the lowest they've ever been. We have like 2 weeks of supplies if everything goes down.
Yes, and that's where I could have storage in my fridge for 3 weeks.
Oh.
So if I was the only one using it. So 2 weeks are not much, that's for sure.
And how many weeks without electricity?
It depends on what kind of time of year it is, right?
Yeah.
If it's in the midst of the cold season, you can just put it outside on the balcony or something.
Yeah.
So, but I wouldn't want to stay where I am currently staying anyway, as I said. No. You need to be in a mountain valley with a lot of supplies.
Yeah.
Preferably canned food.
Yeah.
Of course. 2 years of canned food while we are relearning hunting.
So back to the figure, the number in Monbiot's text. How many would you say could live in Britain 5 years after the collapse?
It's impossible to say, really. It depends on the return of the wildlife, right? But of course, there is hardly no forest at all anymore. There are just tiny clusters. If you see it from the air, like I did on Monday, it's just agriculture land, all of it, almost all of it. So it's just hopeless, totally hopeless for survival.
And I think I read somewhere that England became so bold, so treeless, because of her appetite for wars and for building, warships.
The forest was basically gone by the time they did that. Really.
All right.
I read something about that. The timber didn't come from Britain.
No.
They built the warships in the 1600s, approximately, and the timber didn't come from Britain. It came from Slovakia or something.
Yeah, and I think that was also when the Scots would go into the Hardangerfjord area and Kamskogen and build giant sawmills to take out all the pine wood from the Hardanger area in western Norway. So that's probably also going to shipbuilding and wartime production, I guess. Oh, my throat.
As I said, it was in the early Middle Ages, around 1200 or something, or even before. They chopped down most of the forest. Actually, several thousand years ago, it started several thousand years ago. The Salisbury Plains, right?
Salisbury.
It used to be a forest. A very big forest, like the Sherwood Forest. Used to be in 1200. But the Salisbury Plains were forests, all of it. But as I said, it was covered by trees and forests. So there were forests. There was forest everywhere.
Yeah. So continuing with England, I have recently this week I read a book that I got a tip from someone in Ireland. and it's a book from 2005. It's called Conjuring Hitler. It's by Guido Preparata, an Italian-American guy. And the subtitle is How Britain and America Made the Third Reich. It's pretty interesting because not only the Nazi Germany was created by bankers and England's English military intelligence, but even the Soviet Union, with the so-called communist revolution. The guys pulling the strings were military intelligence in London, and with the help of the Bank of England and the City of London. And their biggest fear, according to this guy, their biggest fear geopolitically was that the continental powers of Germany and Russia would cooperate, start putting their brains and their muscles together, with the German technology and know-how and the Russian vast areas of natural resources and stuff. With those two countries collaborating, England could never become or maintain its.
I read about that. It's they have all Western powers have always wanted to conquer Russia. It hasn't changed at all.
Yeah, or at least to keep Russia apart from Germany, because that alliance is something they didn't want, and to keep the British Empire, the empire where the sun never sets, they were actually willing, according to this author, to both instigate the socialist communist revolution by fake or false means in Leningrad, St. Petersburg, and also to, from the get-go, manipulate Germany into going fascist, or whatever you call the Hitlerian regime. And they wanted these two powers to destroy each other. They wanted Moscow.
Yes, at least Nazi Germany was a tool in their eyes to destroy Russia or Soviet Union. What I read is that they had their eyes on Russia long before, 200 years ago even.
Yeah.
It was one of the world powers then, like it is now.
Yeah.
So they wanted to, the Americans and Western powers in general, I guess, wanted to conquer it, to own it.
Yeah.
And that hasn't changed.
So the funny thing is, in this book is that when this, in their perspective, in the English perspective, this dreadful, Bolshevik revolution happens in Russia, and then, no powers tried or they succeeded in stopping it, either from the Alaskan Siberian side or from the Western Scandinavian or European side. I mean, come on, this is a threat to every capitalist society in the world, and they're supposed to have just failed in stopping these gun-toting Bolshevik revolutionaries. I mean, so he has a lot of good.
I think they did. I think it was real. Maybe the first revolution were instigated by Western powers, but it went further than they wanted. So I think the Bolshevik revolution is true, but not the original, the social democratic victory first.
But anyway, just to round off this Preparata guy, this Italian author, he's saying that this plan was hatched in the City of London, in the British military intelligence, and they were actually willing to have two world wars, World War I and World War II, and to kill approximately 100 million people. just in order to let Britain and America have their world empire, in the years after these two world wars. That's pretty.
Of course, I do believe there are some people with long-term plans, but I don't. I think they made mistakes, to say at the least. They fucked up their plans, and all their plans after the Soviet Union was formed was to stop the Soviet Union from communism from spreading to the rest of the world, and they tried to do it for 80 years almost before they finally succeeded. But they are still not pleased. They are still have their eyes on Russia.
Don't you think? Don't you think that the sea powers is talking about England and America? Don't you think that they still want to keep Russia and Germany apart?
If they wanted to, if they had the proper oversight and they were aware of what was happening, but I don't think they were aware of what was happening. The revolution, even though there were quite a lot of unrest, it came as a surprise, a big surprise for everybody. That they were indeed managed to do it, but it isn't strange that the pre-revolutionary society in Russia collapsed. It was corrupt to the hairs, so to speak.
Yeah, but it was a British agent who backstabbed the Tsar. The Tsar was murdered by some British agent, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't believe that book is accurate at all. Actually,
okay.
It's too much, really. They would need so much control that they didn't have.
But you know that Lenin was sent in a sealed railway car from Germany through Sweden and Finland and up to St. Petersburg.
I read all about it before. It's none of it is proven really, and it's at best unreliable information. So no, I don't think there was a conspiracy, if you like, at all. It was.
Are you calling me a conspiracy theorist?
No, but the guy writing the book.
Mm-hmm. So the book that you haven't read, you think that book is right?
What you read from it,
mm-hmm.
That's where I take my clue from, right?
Yeah.
And that sounds totally unplausible.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds, unplausible.
Mm. But it's very, very thorough and full of literature references all through the book.
Oh, yes,
so it's
I have read the book before. I haven't read the book, but I have read about it.
But what I'm saying is
references.
What I'm saying is that the book is totally referenced with like hundreds of references to literature and biographies and stuff. So at least if it's a deception, it's a very clever deception. So yeah.
I don't say. What you see is it isn't necessarily a deception. It's just that the guy is totally clueless.
Yeah, I would not say that. I think he's using Occam's razor because there are so many very, very strange ways that England and America is acting throughout the both of the world wars and during the build-up of Nazi Germany for their purposes, for the American and English purposes. There's so many strange things. Why is England doing this? Why doesn't America stop the communist revolution? He's actually got. Preparata has actually got the most plausible, the most simple explanation for what happens is what he is delivering.
Think about the current communications, the communication 100 years ago. You could take a plane and just go to Russia. It would take months to get to Russia if you weren't aware of what was going on, and they weren't. They were taken by surprise, but by the time they could have done something, the Communist Party was well established in Russia.
But you have to remember that the British military intelligence is and was the best in the world. You know, they had total control of what's happening.
No, I read a lot about that too. They were idiots, basically. They was full of it. Their belief in a British superiority was so enormous that they believed they were capable of anything, but they weren't.
Okay.
They did so many mistakes that it was plain ridiculous. The entire world, first the Great War, was so full of mistakes that it was a wonder, a miracle that anything was done at all.
Okay, but
so they were the masters of the world by default because lucky circumstances and everything, and they were because of their colonial power. That's at one time in history, colonial power was the thing to even Holland and the Netherlands managed to be a world power by being in the right place at the right time, by being a faring nation and such.
But let me ask this way, sprechen Sie Deutsch?
You will play there. I used to. I haven't spoken it almost 27 years.
Yeah. So
27 years ago was the last time.
Sie sprechen nicht Deutsch. You don't speak German.
Why
do you think you don't speak German? The point is that even though you don't believe that there was such a plan to create Soviet Russia as one English project and Nazi Germany as another, you have to concede that England and America won the last century. They won the world hegemony.
Of course, that's basically coincidences, if you like.
In politics, there are no coincidences.
Oh yeah.
No.
There's no need to invent stuff like that guy obviously is doing. He is screaming for an explanation, right? Like many far off authors and stuff. They can have the most meticulous logic behind it, but the emperor has no clothes. It's just bullshit.
Okay, we'll see what you say after you read the book too. You know, reading a book is an important part of reading it. I believe anyway. So do you have any?
I wouldn't because I had the chance of reading it years ago. I think. Something similar.
Do you have any points from Twitter or something?
Oh yes. Yeah. Let's see. Just one moment. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's about Claire Patterson, an engineer, if you like. Claire Patterson discovered how trace amounts of lead was dangerous to us. Big Oil fought any removal of lead in gasoline until the 80s. Lead in gasoline increased in major ways lead in human life, leading to massive increase in disease and death. Big Oil refused to acknowledge it. Big Oil sat in Congress, in the US Congress, hearings and lied through their teeth, as usual. Claire Patterson told the truth and fought them for more than 20 years. Claire Patterson's story is one of the countless great examples of how big oil funds doped and refuse to acknowledge truth, because it's counterproductive to their earnings, to their profits. To be absolutely clear, big oil did the same then to obscure the truth about lead as they do about CO2 and the climate change today. It's lead is a dangerous neurotoxin. Big oil and big industry still kept using it for decades after the warnings had come. Some still do. It's a classical tale of greed versus truth, and greed versus health and anything really, life. The Bernie Sanders, he thinks the big pharma guys should go to jail for their mismanagement, gross mismanagement of producing medicine. But the big oil executives, of course, should be go to jail too, and they should also be tortured and a number of other things, by the way. They are really scum of the earth. A typical enterprise, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's a classic tale of that.
And I think you have, in many ways, you have corporations owning the national states, within the, for instance, within the United Nations climate panel and all of that song and dance. You actually have put politicians who are actually in the pockets of corporations. They are put in charge as censors for the real climate scientists. So even the pretty conservative science that is submitted to the climate panel is actually censored and allowed to be censored by these politicians. So it's like what comes out of that process is just really watered out scenarios that every nation on earth can agree to, like even Saudi Arabia or whatever, America, whatever country that doesn't want to do anything with it, they can just say no, because it has to be unanimous,
Oh yes, and many countries agree to it and don't do anything. The Norwegian government opened up several new research facilities the days after Paris. They signed on to the Paris Agreement, Accord. So, and many others did the same. They just signed the paper and proceeded the same procedure as last year.
Business as usual, yeah. No.
Yes, absolutely.
So there's been some discussion now about can we actually stop global warming in its tracks at 2 degrees, and it's pretty interesting because first of all, with the voluntary commitment, whatever they call it, that the nations have submitted to the Paris Agreement, even what they say they want to do is not enough to stop at 1 degree or 1.5 degree and 2 degrees.
If they had gone through the Paris Accords, all of it, it wouldn't have helped at all.
And the nations are even reneging on those commitments, so they're not even doing that, And the other thing is that the so-called science, which is actually the politics of 2 degrees, is based on very conservative climate science that has come through the climate panel, where they don't include a list of things that don't include the permafrost and the methane from permafrost. All of these things that are sort of difficult to say how much it will really be. They just ignore it. And there is a list. I could read the list if you want, but it's a list of 20 or 30 feedback, positive feedback mechanisms that are not included in those 2-degree numbers from the UN. And so the thing is that even if every nation would do sufficiently, which they're not even suggesting themselves, do sufficiently to get to the UN 2-degree thing, that 2-degree number or science is based on a very optimistic, wishful thinking way of getting there, right?
They are basically trying to manage the problem, right?
Yeah.
But the nature, like the governments of the Pacific islands drowning right now, said nature can't be managed, nature can't be negotiated with. And they totally missed the point. Most people today don't have any idea how nature works at all. And as I think I said this on the earlier program or something, if the Paris Accord would have been the Kyoto Accord, then I think something could have been done, because then would the Paris Accord have to be more radical than the Kyoto Accord.
Absolutely, you would have to start back in 97 at the latest, maybe 87, I think, for it to be possible to stop it.
We don't know, of course, but we can extrapolate on what we see today, and the ice in Antarctica is melting from the bottom up. There are huge pools of water below the Antarctic ice, and the calving of icebergs are just phenomenal.
Of course, the frying of the Arctic ice is what's going to get us as a civilization. And when you come to flooding from the Antarctic phase, then you're already at post-collapse, and all you have to do is move your tent a little bit higher up in the hills, So it's like Antarctica is not going to crash civilization; it's just going to make the aftermath a bit wetter.
There are the ice on the northern hemisphere there is much ice here. Really, 90% of all ice is in Antarctica.
Yeah, but it's not just about numbers. It's about changing the color of the North Pole, right? So it's going to be so much hotter and so much more crazy weather because the Arctic sea ice is gonna go away. So
yes, and the tundra, the frozen earth.
Absolutely.
So, of course, but it's all happening simultaneously.
Yeah.
So,
but I'm just saying that according to my understanding, Antarctica will be a problem for the future primitives for the Stone Age people living here in 20, 30 years.
Not necessarily, as I said, the West Antarctic ice sheet, right? That alone will cause 6 meters of sea rise.
Yeah, but that's all of it. That's all of the West Antarctic ice.
Oh yes, but all of it can break off at once, simultaneously. There is nothing keeping that from happening, really.
But the glaciers are still stuck up in the mountains. They have to sort of melt.
Yes, right? There is a thin line binding it to those mountains, really.
Mm-hmm.
And that line may break at any time. That connection may break at any time. And 6 meters in a few weeks at the best, that will definitely collapse civilization. But it will have several things happening simultaneously to really kill off civilization, of course.
Yeah.
The rising of the sea alone, in the time frame we are talking about, won't do it. And neither will the warming itself, at least not for a while. But when everything happens simultaneously, and we get the pandemonium and stuff,
Absolutely.
and social breakdown of society simultaneously.
For instance, you will have winds and storms, and you will have wildfires, and then you will have droughts. Then you will have insects and diseases coming from warmer areas to the colder areas, and like malaria, mosquitoes and stuff, right?
We have that already, right? Both California and in Canada, even in Canada, a huge part of Western Canada has just as much fires as California. As
but
Australia.
Not malaria.
Australia is one big campfire.
I thought you were going to say that Canada had malaria mosquitoes. No.
The mosquitoes is in Finnmark, in Norway, northern Norway already.
Okay.
They are just not dangerous.
Oh, yeah, okay, okay. So they don't have
it needs to be warmer first. It isn't the mosquitoes themselves, right?
It's the parasites.
It's the parasites, and they are not. They can't survive in colder climate. The mosquito can, but the parasite can't.
That's right.
So. If there are just one thing, right? But there are thousands of factors.
Yeah, and everything will descend on major cities and societies all at once, more or less.
And the earth in general, on all life, it's happening already.
And I've set, for technical reasons, I've set sort of the definition of civilization collapse as the week when global trade collapses, because when you no longer can have like food from another continent, that's pretty accurate timing of when you could say that our way of life has collapsed, and when you can't have a letter from America or whatever, we can't get food stuff from Europe up to Norway, for instance.
We need more than that, but of course, the food security, it's ridiculous to even use that word.
Yeah. Food insecurity.
Not that. Yeah. Exactly. Food insecurity. We used in Norway and probably most other European countries, we used to have food security. 100 years ago.
Yeah.
At least to a point. There were hunger and stuff, but there weren't. Everybody didn't starve.
No.
But they would today, except for a few. A few could postpone it, right? But they couldn't keep it from happening.
No.
As you pointed out earlier. The grain, they just have grain for 3 weeks of use.
Yeah, something like that.
And that in itself. So even if a bunch of rich people hold up in some house with a lot of guards on their side, they wouldn't last. They would need far more than that. The way to survive is in small units of 10, 15, 20 dedicated people with a lot of canned food and the will and the ability to learn hunting and gathering.
They have to be skilled. They have to be skilled and tooled up for hunting and fishing, basically, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they would need to be dedicated to teach that to their children.
Yeah, they will have to want will have to want to survive as well. I think it's pretty important. Yeah.
Many people will probably just give up.
Yeah. When they can no longer charge their cell phones, then they just give up.
Or their car or something.
Yeah. So, do you want to finish up with a bit of local activism or anti-war stuff or NATO stuff or something?
Oh yes, we have some. The ship to Gaza is leaving. The most recent ship to Gaza is leaving Bergen tomorrow, heading for Palestine and Gaza.
Mm.
It will visit lots of cities on its journey through Europe. It won't reach Gaza. It probably won't reach Gaza, but it wouldn't reach it at all. At least not until 10 weeks. It will take 10 weeks before they reach it, deliberately. And they will be joined up by 3 more ships. And on the Anarchist Day, the May 1st, we will have marches and protests, unofficial protests against the Syria war and NATO in general.
So, in your words, what is the current situation between Israel and Gaza?
Israel is just continuing their heartless, their inhuman acts, right? It's downright amazing, if you can use that word at all, how they can keep doing what they're doing, killing children, torturing children with impunity without being stopped. The other powers could have stopped them.
I think some minister or something in Israel said on TV that nobody in Gaza is innocent. Is that right?
Exactly. And I am confident that they included the recently born babies, infants.
So even infant babies are terrorists or whatever.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Colonel Chimerhorn, United States Colonel, Indian fighter, Indian exterminator, said that there were the lies, there were the eggs that turned to lies or something.
Oh, that's nice.
But the Israeli government, that's the way they look at the Palestinians. It's so amazing, so startling. They are behaving exactly like the Nazis.
So it's pretty funny because these Palestinians, they speak Semitic languages, right? So it's like they are Semites, and the biggest anti-Semites in all of history are people sitting in the government of Israel, talking about them like vermin and insects.
Because at least some of them, by definition, aren't Semites. So they are as a Nazi. It's a group of people from Georgia, I think.
They're Europeans, right? Yeah.
They are Europeans of a European ancestry, yes. But they converted to Judaism 500 years ago.
Which doesn't make them Semites, I think.
No, they are not Semites.
Ironically.
So it's very ironic as well. But as some of the Israelis are Jews, of course, or genetically, if you can say that about any group. But significant portions of them are not. So they, as I should say, they are the biggest anti-Semites.
Incredible. Yeah.
Yes, but that wouldn't matter if they weren't inhuman assholes.
Okay, this is a family channel, so you cannot really use those words, but you know.
This is a family channel.
Some people think it's gonna be a family channel, but how about Syria? How can you stop the insane war on Syria? Is that going to be solved in Bergen?
We are trying to raise awareness about that. That's all we can do, of course.
Because maybe the listeners don't know this, but I think 4 days after the alleged chemical weapons attack in Syria, all of the Norwegian media have been talking about some Facebook message sent to one of the politicians who's like been on every TV channel in Norway, every newspaper, every day for 20 days. They've been talking about one text message from some guys in a cottage in Sweden.
It's a typical distraction, right?
Yeah, so it's like they just have wall-to-wall coverage of this Facebook Messenger message. It's not even an SMS message, it's just on the Facebook Messenger. Somebody so-called face raping some other politician and using his smartphone to send a rude message to this female politician who is not in government but another party. And it's been on and on and on every day, all day, and even the talk shows have had her as a guest talking about this awful text message. I mean, come on. And yes. It's just been shutting out all the important stuff from the news. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just remarkable how the establishment media agree when they need to choose important issues.
Yeah. So what has been in the shadow of this insane coverage of the text message is the fact that even independent experts have been able to ascertain that either there wasn't a chemical attack in Syria, or at least it wasn't by the government, right? I can't remember which one it is, but that's an important part of starting a new world war.
But there was probably no attack, no gas attack. None of the inhabitants of the place know anything about it. And so, but if there was an attack, there was certainly not Syrian government behind that. So it's just a typical false flag operation, really.
Absolutely. I think maybe on that note, we can say thank you for listening and see you back in May.
In May.
Okay?
Yes.
Bye, Amos.
Bye.